When we plug into the socket at home or turn on the gas, we want to have a supply that is constant and consistent in quality. How can we achieve this goal? How can we measure the quality of the supply? What do we do in the case of emergency when supply is low? For a product such as gas or electricity, there are three main qualities we want to look out for. Of course, when you have a short commodity product, much of the focus is on cost, but two other topics of interest are availability and the quality. With respect to availability, we have several areas of impact. We have the area of peak supply, where we are dealing with demand fluctuations. And we have contingencies, so emergency provision. For essential services, it's important to have a sufficient supply of the commodity under all circumstances, as many of our economic processes depend on this sufficient supply. When we talk about peak delivery, let's take the example of gas. There is a kind of seasonal variation for Europe. In the winter, the need for domestic heating done by gas fuel heaters is of course much higher than in the summer. As a result, the profile for gas consumption is at a minimum during the summer months and at a maximum during the winter months. For the system to be able to deliver the demand in the winter, it needs to have sufficient network capacity. So, the network should not be constructed for the average capacity in the year, but for the peak capacity. To ensure we have sufficient supply during these seasonal variations, there are several solutions available. The first measure is to have swing. For gas fields, this means reducing and increasing the production level depending on the demand for gas. Of course, we can also use storage facilities, such as underground storage or storage in the form of liquid nitrogen gas. Finally, it's possible to import or export more gas to match demand. This more or less shifts the problem to the other countries, because at the same time of year, the gas demand for heating in Germany will not be much different from France. Another key element of a product, such as electricity or gas, is the quality. There are several dimensions of quality when we have a connection to the grid for electricity, for gas or water supply. First of all, safety. Safety means that there shouldn't be any risk involved in the system, both for the operators and for the consumers. Safety also implies the ability to avoid damage if you have, for instance, a leaking gas system. A second characteristic is reliability. Reliability is the ability of a system to transport energy to connected network customers. This deals with the continuous supply of the commodity. Thirdly, there is the product quality that deals with the type of product that is being supplied. What is the gas composition? What is the voltage of electricity delivered? And finally, there is the service quality. The service quality deals not with the product, but with the customer service of the provider. So, if there is a problem with your supply and you give a call to the company, how do they respond? How much time does it take them? The supply of, for instance, electricity forms a kind of chain. The weakest link in the chain defines the reliability of the end product. So, if you have a fully functional transmission grid for electricity, but there is a disturbance on the generation level, then the consumer will not be served. All components in the system need to function properly and with a good quality in order to deliver to the customer. However, the customer often has a network contract with the distribution company, meaning that the distribution company is blamed for problems in the system. It's important, therefore, to have a system perspective on the whole chain of supply. Typically, reliability is split between adequacy and security issues. Adequacy is the long-term component. This will look at whether there are sufficient investments and how the long-term system will develop with respect to networks and innovation. The short-term reliability focuses on security for networks, looking for a short-term equilibrium balance. This balance can be disturbed by different causes, internal or external. Internal causes can be short-term operational problems, which lead to the loss of customers, or long-term problems, such as insufficient quality due to lack of investments. External causes can impact the operation of infrastructure. These causes can be natural, like acts of God, volcano eruptions or flooding, which takes down the infrastructure. Or there are unnatural or third-party causes. These can be, for instance, digging in the ground, which impacts the operation. With respect to reliability, several indicators are used in practice, especially in electricity and gas. These indicators more or less represent how to measure the quality and reliability of the supply. First of all, we have SAIFI, the System Average Interruption Frequency Index. For the average user in the system, it measures how many outages there are during the year. We also have SAIDI, the System Average Interruption Duration Index. This measures the average duration of total interruption during a year. SAIFI is a number. For instance, on average, a customer of the system can have 2 interruptions per year. SAIDI is a time interval, recorded in minutes. If you have a SAIDI of 1 hour per year, this means that the average customer has an interruption for 1 hour in total during the year. We also have CAIDI, the Customer Average Interruption Duration Index. This is the measure of the average time required to restore service to the average customer per interruption. So from the moment that the interruption becomes transparent, this measures how much time is needed for restoring the system. Companies not only need to have good reliability, but also good commercial quality. This deals with the customer service provided by the network company or the infrastructure provider. It measures how companies deal with service actions. For instance, how fast it responds when there are problems with respect to the voltage of the electricity supplied. Commercial quality also covers the transparency of a company. What are the charges for a new connection? Are the consumers notified in advance when there is a supply interruption due to maintenance? The Customer Satisfaction Index is just one quantitative measure of this. It is something like an interview in which customers can score how good they perceive the service of the operator to be. A more specific measure is the number of complaints to the regulator, which also gives information on the commercial quality of the company. It is one thing to measure the reliability and quality of the supply of electricity and gas, but it is another thing to regulate these. How do governments regulate the quality of supply? What rights do we have as consumers to good quality, reliable and readily available energy resources? For a discussion of these, please make some time for the next lesson.